الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. إن شاء الله تعالى, the title is Al-Halal wal-Haram in our homes, and this is a very broad topic, and there are many things, of course, but what makes it easy is that Al-Halal, or what's permissible, is what everything is halal unless proven otherwise. So if we get to know what's haram, then the rest is halal. And we might not be able to cover everything that is might be haram in our homes, because otherwise this is also an extensive or a very long subject. But in general, the haram is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, and what the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam forbade. And this is not for an individual to decide. This is wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one that has this ownership, this right, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And it's a major sin, and it's haram, of course, to make what Allah permitted haram. ولا تقولوا لما تصف ألسنتكم الكذب هذا حلال وهذا حرام لتفتروا على الله الكذب. Those who make something haram when Allah permitted it, they are forging, they're lying about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is worse than the sin itself. It's for someone to make something halal haram. So the halal and the haram is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when it comes to the haram, if something is haram, then there is no excuse in the haram. We have to stay away from the haram. And we have to sacrifice, we have to be patient, we have to be obedient to Allah, knowingly, with certainty, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade something, that means it's evil for us in this life and in the hereafter. And not everything is evil. That means a person has to see the evilness of it in the immediate sense. Person, if he eat poison and it tastes good while he's eating it, but it kills him. Right? So it's not that he would take an evidence, since it tastes good, why can't I just eat it? Because it has poison in it. So al-haram is evil, and we have to bring into our hearts, where they call it the istibsha' al-haram, that you would forbid it in your heart, that you would hate so much the haram. The haram is such a great thing. It's not an easy matter. Don't be at ease with the haram. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade something, you need to make barriers in your heart against it. And look or think of the things that you would have this, you abhor it so much in this life, you hate it so much. Why is it? Is it based on the deen of Allah, or just based on your culture, or how we were raised and so on? We need to, when we get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, that means this is evil, and we get to have some barriers between us and the haram, and the most important barriers in our hearts, that this is something that we cannot even come close to. And the haram can be, when we look into, when we live in homes, right, in our houses, it doesn't matter whether it's a house or apartment, or everybody has a place where they go back to and they sleep in and so on. Either it has to do with an individual task or things that we bring into our homes or actions that we do, versus relationships. And there are people that either a person is living alone or is living with his family. So there are sins in all kinds of levels. And with the sins, there are obligations to be observed. And these obligations, we also get to know it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And if a person is not fulfilling his obligations, that means he's committing haram. So the haram doesn't have to be just the sins, in the sense that it's something forbidden from the start. It's also something to do with the obligations. So if someone, it's an obligatory thing upon them to pray the salah at home, like the women, for example, they don't have to come to the masjid. If they come to the masjid, they can come to the masjid for the salah in the proper way, of course. But definitely, it's the home is the best place for the woman in general to pray. She gets the best of the rewards there. If she delays the salah, or the next time of the salah comes and she didn't make the salah, this is a sinful act in the home, major sin. Very, even can reach the person wal'ayadu billah to the state of kufr if it's done in an intentional way. So this is haram, even though a person did not bring anything of haram into the house. It's not fulfilling the obligations that is upon us. Birrul walidain is an action done at home and outside of the home. And this is an obligation. This is such a major thing, and it's a major sin to do the slightest uquq or the slightest discomfort to the parents. This is a major sin, and can be easily done at homes, where a person would say uff to his parents or raise his voice or disobey them, all kinds of things. And this is a subject that needs for us to learn and ways for us to observe and things like this. And the same thing with the rights of the husband, the rights of the wife, the duties that need to be observed, not what a person is raised to know or people in his surroundings or environments. Wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for a woman, a Muslim woman, her example are the wives of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the companions radiallahu anhum, those who received the wahy from Allah and they applied it. And for the husband, the example for him is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his manners and so on, and how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum understood it. And this is the concern that we should have in our homes. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had children. How did they acted based on the ayat of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? How was the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam being a father, to imitate him in that sense? So this is a very lengthy thing, the more that when we get to look into the ayat of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But the word or what needs to be present in our homes to understand that this is part of our deen, and it's easy to list what's haram. But to bring the reality of al-iman in our homes, it needs to be established on al-iman from the very beginning, when a person chooses their spouse based on al-iman. And some people, if they repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala later, how to deal with the situation when they're not upon the strong iman, and to bring these meanings into our homes. This is definitely the foundation of our homes. And to keep the iman and the steadfastness upon the deen of Allah, we have a responsibility. The husband or the man in the household, he has the main responsibility, and also everyone within the household have a responsibility. And there are certain qualities that needs to be acquired. One of which we need to, and it's something that is mentioned with regards to homes specifically, this issue of as-sakina. And as-sakina is tranquility, comes from as-sukun, when something is not moving too much, right? And it's the opposite of al-ittirab wal-qalaq. When someone is disturbed, when someone is under stress, you feel like your heart is going back and forth. You're thinking about many different things at the same time. You're stressed about the past and the future and things like this. People that you meet, so many that you meet throughout the day, things like this, you want to have in your home. When you return to your home, if it's a man, you want to have sakina there. And the sukoon is the calmness, and not the rough life that people would have in the street. The house is not the market. So there's no hustle and bustle and things like this, but rather it's sakina, it's calmness. And this sakina, it's a huge subject. And I would like to mention some things with this subject, because we're all in need of it. But one of the very basic principles in sakina, that it's, as they call it, sifa wahbiyya wa laysat sifa kasbiyya. It's an attribute that it's given to a person as a gift from Allah, and it's not something that you would earn. So as-sakina comes from Allah, and we would see that in the ayat of the Quran. So this is not something that you let me get some sakina in. It's not like you let me pray 2 rak'ah, I prayed 2 rak'ah. There's no such a thing as I did some sakina, tranquility, peace, calmness. It doesn't work this way, but there are means to it. There are means to achieve it, to have it. Means, if it's taken, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that brings down the sakina from above. So if the sakina is not present in homes, there are things mentioned in the Quran specifically about homes being or having one of the qualities of it, that it has sakina by the qadr of Allah. That means it's for everybody. There is a sense or a level of sakina. If it's correct to say, many meanings in the deen of Islam has 2 types of it. One of it's qadari, kawni, it's by the qadr of Allah, it's something universal, and something unique, being shar'i, dini, something religious. And many things are like this. So for example, you would have a sakina there is a sense to all of the people that they should have some sakina and tranquility in their homes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّن بُيُوتِكُمْ سَكَنًا, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala made for in your homes sakan. So the homes are the place of sukoon. You go to sleep, you calm down, different than when you are outside. So this is one of the characteristics of the homes. So therefore, when the ulama, they say, one of the means to bring the sakina at home is to be at home. Right? But if a person doesn't stay much at home, because he's wasting his time outside, unless he's doing a good deed, of course, outside. But one of the reasons why there's no sakina at home is because maybe a person is not spending enough time at home. Because even if he's doing something halal, but too much overboard outside of the home, working too many hours, right? So he would lack some of that sakina that is required to have in the homes. Also, if a person is at home, but he's not really at home, which is the new fitan that we acquired in this life with the virtual world and things like this, it takes away, of course, this is one of the main sources now of the opposite of the sakina. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the evil of it. The same thing, the wife, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the wife a source of sakina for her husband. And this is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِي أَنْ جَعَلَكُمْ مِنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. From the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the signs of Allah, from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He made from your spouses, from your wife, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. For you, this is the verb of the sakina, that you would have this calmness with her, towards her. And He made between you mawadda, love and mercy. So this is also, one of the sources of sakina. But if the religious sakina is not with it, then it becomes very disturbing. The same thing, the nighttime is a time for sakina. It's time to calm down at nighttime. Unless a person has to work at nighttime, this is an exceptional thing. But when, because of maybe electricity and lights and other things, entertainment or whatever, which can be haram or halal, whatever, many people are deprived from the sakina because of the deeds done at nighttime. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ لِتَسْكُنُوا فِيهِ وَالنَّهَارَ مُبْصِرًا. He made the layl for you, لِتَسْكُنُوا فِيهِ, for you not to be moving too much during the night. And we see that when we, at night time, you find people calm down because people are at home. But when they're at home and they're doing all kinds of haram things, that's not the sakina that is needed. And when we see the night actions or the deeds done at night in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, in the house of the companions anhum, in the houses of the believers, what is the duties to be done at night? Is, for example, the Prophet ﷺ كان يكره النوم قبل العشاء والكلام بعده. The Prophet ﷺ used to dislike sleeping before Isha so that the Isha prayer is not missed, and he would dislike speaking after Isha, unless except if there's a daif, a guest, or sitting with his family, staying with his family, talking with his family, then he would stay up. So that means there has to be a reason why a person is staying up after Isha. And one of the valid reasons is to sit with one's family. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted, and that's one of the means that brings the sakina at home. And also when there is the night prayer, Qiyamul Layl, and the hadith of Usayd ibn Hudayra radiallahu anhu, when he was praying at night and reciting Surah Al-Kahf, and he had his horse, and some of the narrations there was a camel, but there was a horse, and the horse started moving, and he looked up and there was a cloud, and it keeps on coming closer and things like this. And in the next morning, he said that to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, تِلْكَ السَّكِينَةَ تَنَزَّلَتْ. First of all, he said, اقرأ, or keep on reciting. Why did you stop reciting? Because when that happened, he stopped reciting the Quran. So the Prophet ﷺ, in some of the narrations, he told him he should have kept on reciting. And then he said, this is السَّكِينَةَ تَنَزَّلَتْ بِقِرَاءَةِ الْقُرْآنِ. The sakina, the tranquility came down as a result of the recitation of the Quran, which is one of the religious means, one of the most important means for the sakina to be established at homes, is the recitation of the Quran, especially the night time, especially the Quran recited during the night. and especially during the salah of Qiyamul Layl. So the night is a time of sakina. The house has its sakina, the wife and the relationship between the husband and the wife. So that's something that we should invest in, and we should have the time to acquire these types of sakina, which pushes away the haram. And one of the easy ways to push away the haram is to fill our time with the halal, with the virtuous acts, with the acts of ibadah. And it's either you fill it with goodness or evil, والعياذ بالله. And nafs, even oneself, نفسك إن لم تشغلها بالحق شغلتك بالباطل. Your nafs, either if you don't make it busy with al-haq, it will make you busy with al-batil, with falsehood. So to understand that this life, there's nothing in between. There's no neutral thing in this life. Either a person is upon the haq, or if he's not, then his nafs is going to get, his own self will get him to be upon falsehood, and this is the ways of the shayateen. So these are the universal things. Then when it comes to the religious matters of how the sakina is and how to bring it in our life, and this is basically the ibadah to be established in home according to the ilm, to the knowledge. One of which, an important aspect of that, is the salah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا تجعلوا بيوتكم قبورا. Do not make your homes graveyards. And the graveyard, when you think of if a person goes to the graveyard now, would he have sakina? Would he have tranquility being in the graveyard? It's a very spooky, scary thing, and he would run away from it. So, but the graveyard for the believers, those who are dead in their graves, is a place of sakina. But for those who are alive, even if they are believers, nobody wants to stay in the graveyard. But the Prophet ﷺ, which has always been repeated, that he does not exaggerate in his statements ﷺ, he said, do not make your homes like the graveyards. And why did he say that? He said, Sallu fi buyutikum, pray in your homes. When you don't pray at home, you make your home like a graveyard. And it's not permissible to pray in the graveyard, so that means you should not make it as if it's not permissible to pray at home. And he was addressing who? The Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they pray the fard with the Prophet ﷺ. So they are righteous people. They pray in jama'ah in the masjid. But then when they go home, this is what he was telling them. Do not make your home's graveyard that you don't pray. Pray at home. Not the fard, but the optional salah. Whether it's the sunnah salah or the nafl salah, if a person prays the sunnah in the masjid to make sure that he doesn't miss it. And that's why for those who come to the masjid, there is the sunnah before and after the salah. The sunnah before the salah, for other than the imam, if the people would wait for the imam, is to be prayed in the masjid. And to come early for the salah, this is what is most recommended, to always come early to the masjid. And this is one of the things that we need to be encouraged to do. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. And alhamdulillah, mashallah, when people are away from the masjid and it requires for them to drive to the masjid, it's a lot of mujahada and struggle every time. And definitely this is a good thing. And it's we're not saying that this is something that is not good. It's definitely such a great thing. But if we put a little bit more effort to come earlier to the salah, that brings all kinds of means of sakina and khushu' and khudu' in the salah. A person would have more devotion in the salah if he comes early to the salah. And there are many reasons, one of which is we don't hear the adhan. So we're always programmed on the iqamah time. Here in this type of environment, we only know the iqamah time. We don't know the adhan time. But if we are more linked to the adhan time, we will come at the adhan time. And that's one of the things that it's a loss when people don't hear the adhan. Because the adhan is the cut-off time between a person being busy with this dunya, even if it's halal and mubah and so on, and leaving everything to come to the salah. And it's meant to be 5 times a day like this. And this is one of the great means to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah and to have the sakina. And this is one of the great means for a person to have his heart very strong. A Muslim, no one is like a Muslim on the face of earth if a Muslim guards his 5 daily salah in the perfect way. Because whoever has this ability in his heart, that he will be busy with things, worldly matters, whatever there is, and then immediately he would detach himself, and he has that strength to detach himself completely from this and to leave it and to be in something totally different. If a person is used to this 5 times a day, every day, he's the strongest person on the face of earth. He has that mental ability that he can choose for himself to detach from things and to be attached to something else. Many people, they fall into all kinds of miseries because they're not able to get themselves away from whatever situations that they're in. So the Muslim, he has this ability, but with the condition that he train himself. The same thing if he's at home, right, to come early to the masjid, each one according to their means and capacities and so on. But to pray the sunnah in the masjid when a person comes early, and there are hadith that shows the reward of coming early for Salatul Dhuhr, for example, and things like this. And even if a person prayed the sunnah at home before the salah, then if he comes to the masjid before he sits, then he should pray 2 rak'ah before he sits down. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that shows the importance of praying 2 rak'ah before a person leaves and 2 rak'ah when a person enters. Before leaving the home, it protects the person from makhraj as-su, or going out and facing evil. And if a person prays 2 rak'ah when he enters home, protect the person from madkhal as-su, protect the person from the evil entering of the home, which is another thing. Right? When a person enters his home, there are things is going to be happening when you enter your house. Right? Whether it's going to be a very pleasant day or a pleasant night, or the total opposite. So one of the religious means to push away the harm and the disputes and all of these things, and to bring the sakina, is that the man of the household, the responsibility of the man of the household, when he walks into the house, for a person try his best to pray 2 rak'ah first before dealing with whatever is in the house. And this is something that is recommended to be done. And there are rulings with relation to matters of the salah, making sure the head of the household, he's responsible for making people in his household making the salah on time. It's a duty that we have to be patient with. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا لَا نَسْأَلُكَ رِزْقًا نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that to the Prophet ﷺ and to the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ, command your family to make salah, وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا, make yourself patient to be upon this. And it's one of the very difficult things if you have someone in your household that is not up to the salah from his own self. If he is living with you, that means you have to make sure that they make salah. And then the question comes in place, if someone is sleeping and the salah, he would miss the salah. He's sleeping for Fajr salah, you try to wake them, but you're going to miss Salatul Fajr. So you go make Salatul Fajr, and then you come back and they're still sleeping and the sun is about to rise. Is it mandatory for you to wake them up? Is it haram for you? You prayed Fajr and you woke up early and everything. Is it haram for you to leave someone in your household asleep? If you are the one in charge of the household, yes, it's haram. You have to wake them up. There's no choice. This is part of the test that we have to go through. You make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you advise, you teach, all these types of things we have to do, but it's not permissible to make them sleep and the sun rises and they're still asleep. But what if, and maybe the what ifs might be taken in a relaxing way, but what if, for example, everybody woke up after sunrise, so they already missed the salah, right? You woke up, for example, after sunrise and you prayed, and they already missed the salah. Do you have to wake them right there immediately? Maybe this is not mandatory in that case, because already they missed it already. But this is not the norm. This is, once in a while or so if it happens. But even if that happens and a person overslept, then the time for the salah is when they woke up and there's no harm on them if there was no taqsir or shortcoming from their side. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man nama an salatin aw nasiya fa salatu hina yadhkuruha." Whoever overslept or forgot a salah, then its time is when he remembers it. And that happened even to the Prophet ﷺ when he was with the companions in an expedition. But it happened one time. It happens once every so long, not the norm. Otherwise, a person would be falling into major sins. So the salah, those who are in the household, haram for someone to miss the salah. And we have to not to wait for the salah time to come to tell people to make salah. Where are we throughout the day and raising them and so on? We have to make sure that the values that we establish in our homes is in such a way that the deen is the most important thing. Anything else in our life has no value, without any exaggeration, has zero value. It's nothing whatsoever unless first we establish the deen of Allah. If the household is upon the deen of Allah and there's no haram, then anything else becomes of a value and becomes beautiful and becomes very nice. The school and the work and everything else. But if there is the deen is not established, if there is the haram at home, then all of the things that we do becomes source of misery for us, whether it's schools or work or anything. What's the benefit of even relationships? What's the benefit of being married to start with? What's the point of it? What's the purpose of it if it's not based on the deen of Allah? If it does not establish for us the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's the purpose? What's the point of it? It's nothing whatsoever. So when we put these types of meanings in the heart of everyone, then things falls in its place, and there's no contradiction then, but also we have to be patient and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, as the hadith of U'tban al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, when he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he told them that he is someone that his eyesight is very weak, and he wants the Prophet ﷺ to come and pray in his house so that people would, and between him and to come to the masjid, it floods, and the people are not able to come to the masjid. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ if he can come one day to pray in his house so that people would see that and they would pray with him jama'ah if they're prevented from coming to the masjid. So the Prophet ﷺ went there and he asked him, where do you want me to pray? And he prayed, and the people prayed behind him, and so on. So this also shows that if a person missed Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid, whether it's because of rain or he missed it, whatever reason there is, then to make sure that there is a Jama'ah established in the home. A man should not pray Salatul Fard alone, unless there is nobody whatsoever to pray with him Jama'ah. So to make sure that the Jama'ah is established, and also our children to be raised like this. If you're a man, and we have in our homes men and women, that's it, right? And the men have responsibilities and the women have responsibilities. So the men, Salatul Jama'ah is obligatory upon them. And if they miss the Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid, then they make it Jama'ah at home. And to be easy with them, if they miss the Jama'ah in the masjid, in the beginning, to make it easy for them, but make sure that you pray Jama'ah at home. And then eventually they will be always praying Jama'ah in the masjid. But not to miss Salatul Jama'ah for men. For women, they don't have to pray Jama'ah. If women pray Jama'ah, do they get more rewards? Yes, of course, inshallah, because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about the rewards of Salatul Jama'ah, this is in general for both men and women. But she doesn't have to pray Jama'ah, and her prayer at home alone is more in reward than if she comes to the masjid and prays Jama'ah in the masjid. That's more reward for her. And it shows the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in perfecting how things are in the household. And also the role of the woman in this, that she become the source of sakina for her husband. Because the husband needs to put the effort to go to the masjid and to come back from the masjid, and she doesn't have to. So she makes it easy for him so that he would establish the deen. And she helps him, and she helps her children to the best of her ability so that they establish the deen in such a way. As we said, there is the sunnah prayer. After the sunnah al-ba'diyah, it's best to be prayed at home, but if a person would forget or so, then it's better to pray it in the masjid. But with all of this, to remember the hadith, لا تجعلوا بيوتكم قبورا, do not make your homes as graveyards. So there are so many benefits when it comes to the man praying at home, nafl salah, sunnah salah, whatever, so that the person is establishing the salah according to the command of the Prophet ﷺ. And therefore, if people pray in jama'ah in home, for example, and they all pray together, then the men and the boys are with, for example, if the husband is leading the salah, behind him is his children, for example, whoever in the household. And if there's only one person, then it stands next to him. And for the woman, the mother, for example, or the daughter, and so on, is to be behind them completely in the line, the row behind them completely, not on the side to them, but completely behind them. And it doesn't matter whether it's a husband and a wife. Husband and wife cannot pray next to each other. She has to be behind him, and he's in front, and he leads her in the salah. It's not permissible, of course, for women to lead the salah. Even if a woman, a mother, she leads her child in salah, no, it's not permissible for her to lead him. in the salah. If he is someone that is, say, less than 7 years old and he doesn't know how to make salah, and she's the only one with him, and she's teaching him to make salah, he can pray next to her, but she's not imam, he's just imitating her. But she's not making salatul jama'ah, and he's praying as ma'moom, but he imitates her, she teaches him, mashallah, this is all good. So there's some ahkam, some rulings when it comes to when people are praying together in the home. This is with regards to the salah. There's the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be established in home, and one of which, as we heard, recitation of the Quran. Surah Al-Baqarah is to be recited in the homes, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the house that Surah Al-Baqarah is recited in it, لا يقرب شيطان, shaitan does not come near to it for 3 days. So to recite Surah Al-Baqarah. And مثل البيت الذي يذكر الله عز وجل فيه والبيت الذي لا يذكر الله عز وجل فيه كمثل الحي والميت. One of the narrations, البيت, the example of the house that the remembrance of Allah is in it versus the house there is no remembrance of Allah in it is like the example of the life and the dead. So it's the same thing as the graveyard and other places. It's all according to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the remembrance of Allah. So this is where, with the few minutes, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, when he talked about as-sakina. And the sakina, as we said, it's something that is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not something that we earn. And it's mentioned in the Quran, and we look at the verses of the Quran, there are 6 places in the Quran where the sakina are mentioned. And we need to establish the sakina by seeking help from Allah, because it's, again, as we said, you don't do sakina, no, it comes to you. So how we bring the sakina in our homes and our relationships and so on, because in relationships, it's only one aspect of the sakina, because the sakina, the place of it is in the heart, and it shows in relationships. But this is very interesting for us to reflect upon. The first ayah that, according to the order of the Quran that we have, is in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 248. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَكُمُ التَّابُوتُ فِيهِ سَكِينَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. In the story of Talut and Jalut, and when they asked for a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they asked for the king to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with him, that their prophet, he said to them that the sign of his kingdom ship is that he would bring to you a tabut, box or so, fihi sakina. In it is sakina, min rabbikum, from your Lord. What is this sakina that was in the tabut? Sufyan al-Thawriya, rahimahullah, and others, they said it was something physical. Rihun mahfufa, or something, wind, Allah knows best, but was something in this tabut that is sakina, and brings the sakina to them. And as we see from the hadith, the sakina came down. So the sakina can be something physical, but we don't see it with our own eyes, we see the effect of it. And Allah knows best. Whether it's the angels, they come down as a result of the sakina, or as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the angels, they come down as a result of the sakina. And the sakina brings the angels to the homes. And if there's no sakina, who would be in the homes? The shayateen. They don't go together. Either the shayateen or the angels. The shayateen, they do all kinds of crazy stuff. So to push that away and to bring the sakina is to take the means to establish it. That's why Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he said, every sakina in the Quran, it means al-itmi'nan, al-tuma'nina. Tuma'nina is like a meaning of the sakina. Tuma'nina is to be also in state of calmness. Nafs al-mutma'inna, the nafs that it's not in state of dispute with itself. It's not struggling anymore, whether it's to be steadfastness on the deen of Allah or not. It's already set on its way, and it has this calmness and the tranquility. So every sakina mentioned in the Quran gives that meaning, except the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah. The ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, which is, as we just heard, whether it's something that was physical. The second meaning, first of all, here we see that it's sakinatun mir rabbikum. The sakina is from your Lord. That means this is again something that is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second ayah in Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 26. ثم أنزل الله سكينته على رسوله وعلى المؤمنين. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down the sakina on the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and the believers. And this is also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that brought it down on the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and on the believers. And imagine in the battlefield, when people are outnumbered by the disbelievers, there's no means of victory whatsoever. And there's all kinds of intimidations from the disbelievers, physical and non-physical. What would be the hearts of the people in that state? Terrified. And when the heart is terrified, then a person is not able to think properly, is not able to do anything. So at these types of difficult moments, when the heart is full of sakina, this is the first or the ground level of victory. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to the Prophet ﷺ and the companions when he put down that sakina in their hearts. And once the sakina is in the hearts, then a person is able to act in the proper way, and he gets so much strength, far more than he would lose. A person would lose his strength when he loses the sakina, when he panics, when things like this. So this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he said وَعَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and unto the believers, and when there's a hukm or when there's a jaza, when there's a recompense or a reward is linked to a wasf or linked to a characteristics, then it's more according to the characteristics. This is a rule in the Quran. إِذَا عُلِّقَ الْحُكْمُ عَلَى وَصْفٍ. If the hukm or the recompense or the reward is conditioned to an attribute or a characteristics. So what happens? The more the characteristics is perfected, the more the reward or the more of the hukm will be perfected. So you can receive that much of sakina, or you can receive that much of sakina. Sakina is levels. So the more the iman is perfected, the belief is there and strong, the more sakina that will be established, which is another means to establish it. The third ayah also in Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 40, إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا فَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَتَهُ عَلَيْهِ وَأَيَّدَهُ بِجُنُودٍ لَمْ تَرَوْهَا. When the Prophet ﷺ was in the cave with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu in Hijrah, and the disbelievers are right there. And if someone looked down at his feet as Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, just looking down. When I was a child, I used to think, what does it mean to look into his feet? Nobody looks into their feet. You don't look at your feet when you're standing. But what he means is if he looks down. Like if someone they were standing right there. If they just looked down, which is the normal thing for them, for anybody to look down, they would see it. They would have seen them. So when it comes to the physical means, they already seized and caught and everything. And this is when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he said that to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, لو نظر أحدهم إلى قدم إلى أبصارنا. If he looks down towards the direction of his foot, he would see us. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, what did he say to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu? He said, يا أبا بكر ما ظنك باثنين الله ثالثهما. What do you think of two people? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is their third. That means you don't have to worry, you don't have to be sad, you don't have to be panicking whatsoever. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you, then none of the creation of Allah would be able to harm you in any way or form. So that's what the ayah إِذْ يَقُولُ صَاحِبِهِ لَا تَحْزَنْ. Don't be sad, don't be grieved. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indeed with us. So as a result of that, the sakina came down. The sakina is there to say this, and the sakina came down. فَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَتَهُ عَلَيْهِ وَأَيَّدَهُ بِجُنُودٍ لَمْ تَرَوْهَا. And also it shows that when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was concerned, he was not concerned about his life or panicking because he might lose his life or they would catch him or so. He was worried about the deen of Allah. He was worried about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is a legitimate, it's a good worry, and it's a good feeling that he has. So one of the means to establish the sakina is to be means to one another, is to give the sakina to one another. As the Prophet ﷺ said that to Abu Bakr. So the believers, they need to say that to one another. But one of the sad things is that every time we get together, we talk about the things that doesn't bring the sakina. Illa man rahim Allah. We talk about the things that cause people to panic. Oh, this is going to happen, the life will collapse, there's so much fitan, it's good to talk about things to be warned against it. But always talking about how strong others are and how plotting they're doing and things like this. Inna Allah ma'ana. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with us, but we need to be really truthful when we say that by being obedient to Allah. So this is one of the means to establish it. The fourth ayah in Surah Al-Fath, Surah Al-Fatih, As-Sakina is mentioned more than one time. هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين ليزدادوا إيمانا مع إيمانهم ولله جنود السماوات والأرض وكان الله عليما حكيما. It is He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that brought down as-sakina, tranquility in the hearts of the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that brought it down into the hearts of the believers. لِيَزْدَادُوا إِيمَانًا مَعَ إِيمَانِهِمْ, for them to increase their iman over their iman. And to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belong the junud, the armies, the deputies in the heavens and earth that people do not know even. And one of which is this: He can throw fear and terror in the hearts of people, and He can throw into the hearts of the believers as sakina, and this is what is needed at all times. And the same thing with the household and things like this. Also in Surah Al-Fatih, 3 times it's mentioned. In verse number 18, لقد رضي الله عن المؤمنين إذ يبايعونك تحت الشجرة فعلم ما في قلوبهم فأنزل السكينة عليهم وأثابهم فتحا قريبا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with the believers when they gave you the pledge, O Prophet of Allah, under the tree, Bay'atul Aqaba. فعلم ما في قلوبهم. Allah knows, He knew what's in their hearts, so He brought down, فأنزل, He brought down as-sakina upon them, and He gave them and reward them by a very near fath and the conquest of Mecca and so on. So the as-sakina came down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what's in their hearts, what was in their hearts that made Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down the sakina on them? The ulama in the tafsir, they say as-sidq. They were upon truthfulness. The truthfulness that was in their hearts when they gave the pledge to the Prophet ﷺ with al-iman, that they had so much truthfulness in this that they don't seek any rewards in this life from this except the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the Prophet ﷺ promised them. If they fulfill their covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward them Jannah. Because of that sidq and that yaqeen and the certainty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down the sakina in the hearts, which is the sidq of having a household based on the deen, the truthfulness in this. Not to show off, not for people to like us or so, but the sincerity in this. The last ayah also in Surah Al-Fatih, جَعَلَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الْحَمِيَّةَ حَمِيَّةَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ فَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَتَهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ وَعَلى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down His sakina on His messenger and onto the believers, when the disbelievers, what's in their hearts is حَمِيَّة الْجَاهِلِيَّة, the prejudice of it, the jahiliyyah, what they're upon is all ignorance, whether it's because of their tribe, is because of their false religion, or because of whatever. The believers on the other side, they receive the sakina from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's something interesting that is brings also the sakina, but to understand it in the proper way, Shaykh Hussain Taymiyyah rahimahullah, which is one of the ways to how to use the Quran. He says, as Ibn Qayyim says, وكان شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمه الله إذا اشتدت عليه الأمور قرأ آيات السكينة. Whenever the matter becomes very tough on him, he would recite these ayat of as-sakina. He would recite it. And this is not bid'ah, right? There's no hadith that says if it's difficult for you recite ayat as-sakina. But reciting Quran when a person is in difficult times, or Al-Quran is cure, is means of cure, and you can choose verses that has certain meanings. Some of the Salaf, for example, when he was in his deathbed, he wanted people to recite to him Surah Al-Imran from a certain ayah, from the beginning of the ayat that talks about the Battle of Uhud. This is something that brings certain meanings in his heart. He wants to hear it in that state when he was dying, for example. Someone likes certain verses that gives him or affect him differently than other verses. So this is a good thing, of course, for a person to relate like this to the Quran. So the ayat talks about as-sakina. The verses talks about having the tranquility in the heart. So when you read these verses, you're seeking that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, and I heard him saying in something very, very difficult, and such a great event happened to him, that in his sickness, he said, تعجز العقول عن حملها. It was very difficult and very tough on him. فلما اشتد عليه الأمر, when the matter was very intense on him, he asked the people around him to recite unto him these ayat of as-sakina. Then immediately he was relieved from this afterwards. And he said, Ibn al-Qayyim, وقد جربت أنا أيضا قراءة هذه الآيات عند اضطراب القلب بما يرد عليه فرأيت لها تأثيرا عظيما في سكوني وطمأنينتي. He said, I tried that myself in reciting these ayat when the heart is so much disturbed in what comes on it. You know, the heart get disturbed because of what you're bringing to the heart. Right? Like when your heart beat fast because of many reasons. So you sometimes you brought it to yourself. So he said, and I found so much great effect as a result of reciting these ayat and as a result of reciting the Quran in general. So, and as a result of that, a person would not again be in state of panicking, and that will bring all kinds of things. And one of which is how to deal with people. I know because of the time of the salah, but there are many types of sakina, as he mentioned. But what I wanted to mention here with regards to the household specifically. When he said there's different types of sakina, but then ayah 18 in Surah Al-Fath. Yes, in Surah Al-Fath, the three ones in Surah Al-Fath, one is 18, one is 26, and one is 4, ayah 4. Now, and of course the sakina that came down to the Prophet ﷺ, he says, as-sakinatu 'inda al-mu'amala. The sakina that comes when you're dealing with others, right? بمحاسبة النفوس, when you deal with your own self. وملاطفة الخلق. The sakina has an effect in being kind and generous and lenient and soft with people, right? Many cases when there's all kinds of crazy things in relationships is because a person is disturbed. He's angry, so he starts saying things, and the other side, you know, takes whatever he said and they act upon it, and people become or have a big fight and all kinds of evil happens. But if a person is in sakina, is in tranquility, he will be able to talk and in a nice way and to do things in the proper way. And this is basically one of the effects of the sakina. Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah, he said, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ وَاللَّهِ لَا تَرَاهُ إِلَّا قَائِمًا عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. He said, the believer, wallahi, by Allah, you won't find him except that he is upon himself always. He doesn't leave himself like this, forgetful. ما أردت بكلمة كذا، ما أردت بأكلة، ما أردت بمدخل كذا ومخرج كذا، ما أردت بهذا، ما لي ولهذا، والله لا أعود إلى هذا ونحو هذا من الكلام. He said that the believer is always unto himself, working on oneself to put oneself in, to be accountable for its actions. He said you would always say to yourself, if you are a believer, what did I mean by this word that I said? What did I mean by this food that I ate? What did I mean by this going into this place, coming out of this place? What did I want by what I did like this? What is the matter with me and this? I would never do this again, like this, questioning oneself in a healthy way, in a good way, not to be, indulged into some form of compulsion, but to do it in a good way, according to the ilm of the deen of Allah, so that the person is always fixing himself. This is putting oneself in responsible. But then the issue of the sakina with mulatafatul khalq. Al-lutf, and one of the names of Allah is Al-Latif. That means the most subtle. That means He would bring things in a hidden way that people don't see it. Right? That means, for example, a person, the mercy of Allah would come to him, but he doesn't see it coming. Right? But it's a word used for kindness and goodness in a lenient and a decent way. He said, وَهِيَ مُعَامَلَتُهُمْ بِمَا يُحِبُّ أَنْ يُعَامِلُوهُ بِهِ مِنَ اللُّطْفِ, is that you would deal with people and treat people the same way that you would love for them to treat you with kindness and leniency. When we do something wrong, for example, do you want people to be harsh on us and to blame us on things, or you want them to treat us in a nice way? We all want people to treat us in a nice way, even if we make mistakes, so that we can learn from our mistakes. But why don't we do the same thing? So when a person has the sakina, he will be able to deal with it in the proper way. وَلَا يُعَامِلُهُمْ بِالْعُنْفِ وَالشِّدَّةِ وَالْغِلْظَةِ, not to deal with them with toughness and harshness and things like this. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ يُنَفِّرُهُمْ عَنْهُ. This is make people repelled away from him. وَيُغْرِيهِمْ بِهِ وَيُفْسِدُ عَلَيْهِ قَلْبَهُ. It makes people disperse away from him, and it corrupts his heart. And we see that if you get angry and you see things, you feel bad that you said what you said and you did what you did, and so on. And even it disturbs the person and his ibadah. وَيُفْسِدُ عليه قلبه وحاله مع الله ووقته, and his time becomes disturbed. That's why فليس للقلب أنفع من معاملة الناس باللطف. There's nothing more benefiting for the heart than to treat people with اللطف, with leniency and goodness and things like this. فإن معاملة الناس بذلك إما أجنبي فتكسب مودته ومحبته, because when you deal with people, either the people are أجنبي. أجنبي is someone that is a stranger to you, is not a relative to you. If you treat them with niceness and goodness, فتكسب مودته ومحبته, you would earn his love and his goodness and so on. وإما صاحب وحبيب, or it's a friend or loved one, فتستديم صحبته ومودته. So the صحبة, this companionship, and the love will continue, will be extended for a long time as a result of this kindness and goodness. وإما عدو ومبغض, or the third category is of people, you enemy and the one that hates you. فتطفئ بلطفك جمرته, you would distinguish the fire in his heart towards you. وتستكفي شره, and you will be protected from his evil. ويكون احتمالك لمضض لطفك به دون احتمالك لضرر ما ينالك من الغلظة عليه والعنف به. And that the fact that you would bear the kindness and the leniency towards him, which is not an easy thing, right? It's much lesser than to bear the harm that will come from him. And this is not cowardness or anything like this. It's being kind and bringing what is best as a result of this. So this is all the effect of the sakina. So instead of saying that we need to do this and that, we need to get to the root of it. And we need to make sure that our hearts have these tranquilities that does not just come by making a decision because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's with al-iman, with being obedient to Allah, with bringing these means into our hearts and our life and our households, and the responsibility, and to push away the haram and to bring in what's halal. So then when we get to know the list of the haram, mixing men and women in the household, it's haram. You know, we're not talking about a husband and a wife or a mother or a sister. We're not talking about the blood relatives, not the maharim. We're talking about those who are not maharim, and they come and they're invited into our homes. And this is, it's a baliyah, and it's something very sad that happens into many of the Muslims' household, where there's no lowering the gaze, where there's mixing that involves haram, not lowering the gaze, softening the way that they speak to each other. And you might be of a family or a household that you might not see evil things, but when you are in a position, when you hear problems and people ask you from different ways, you would realize how much evil these types of mixing is bringing to the households. And you will be shocked of how many things happens that people do not even know about. Sometimes when you're in a position, again, people call you for disputes. And many of these disputes in the household because of this mixing between men and women in gatherings and things like this. That people think, oh, alhamdulillah, we have no problems with this. Why you guys are being strict over this? You'll be amazed of how many, and whether there's problems or not, we have deen to follow. We have to put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this is one of the things that needs to be very clear in our households. When there are strangers comes, relatives, not all the relatives are blood relatives. Cousins are ajanib, they're foreigners. I mean, strangers in the sense that they're not mahrams. So they have to be away. The hijab has to be observed. Men are together, women are together. People say, but at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people were not looking at each other and not lowering their gaze and things like this. If it happens that they pass by, or even if they sit, but they sit in the proper way that they are covered, they're not looking at each other and things of that nature, and all kinds of things that as a result of that, and many other things, inshallah. So we'll stop here because of the time of the salah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam, and we'll continue inshallah.